participants can now see my screen.
Yes, we can. We
We
can.
All
can.
right. So you're seeing one screen only.
One screen, it says week 3.
That's it. That's it. All right. So um, tonight, um, what we're going to do is I just want to see if there are any questions from last week or the week before. Tonight, we're going to focus basically on worship. Um, what are the sacraments from the Episcopal Church's perspective? Other pieces that relate to worship, like music, and then we'll spend a few minutes about the prayer book. Um, that mysterious red book in the pews that, unless people get really bored, they don't often open anymore because everything's printed in bulletin, right?
Yeah.
So that's the plan for this evening. And if you have lots of great questions, please ask them. Um, my teaching style, and I think I mentioned this before, is that I don't go over everything that was written in the book. I bring my own perspective to this. Sometimes I refer to the book or the article, sometimes I don't. But if you have anything that you want to bring up that was of interest or confusing in any of the stuff that you read, I'll be happy to take a stab and see if I can answer that. So this is what our plan is for this evening. Um, so I'll start with the question: is there anything that arose in retrospect from the last couple of weeks, talking about history? Now we're getting into where that history really sort of begins to meet our practice. But is there anything from the last couple of weeks that you would like to revisit or bring up that I didn't touch on?
Hmm.
I've, you want to say something, Dagmar?
No, I was just thinking. No,
I
I think I'm okay. Go ahead.
I'd just like to get a little bit of clarification because I actually I have this what's called the it's called the Great Adventure Catholic Bible, and when you get that, you get this elaborate, really, I mean, detailed, elaborate timeline of all of the councils in the Catholic Church. But my question
Okay.
is, because I'm a little confused about this, because, from what you were saying, the Council of Nicaea affected the Episcopal Church. But
Yeah.
was the Council of Trent just for the Catholics?
Yes.
Okay, and it was just a response to Martin Luther?
Basically, yes.
And I've seen some YouTubes where a lot of the Catholics, the guys on the Catholic YouTube channels, are using the Council of Trent to justify why the Catholic Church isn't as bad as people say it is. So I
Right.
don't know, but that was the main thing that sort of corrected or whatever.
It was a response.
Uh-huh.
Certainly, the Reformation and Luther specifically, had huge issues with the theology of the Catholic Church in the 16th century,
Mm-hmm.
primarily with issues of the indulgences, which was
Oh.
um, this idea that once you die, you go to purgatory, and you're going to
Uh-huh.
spend an amount of time in purgatory. And I'm oversimplifying, of course, but if you
Uh-huh.
have these indulgences, it will get you out of purgatory earlier.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so the church would sell them.
Really?
So it's kind of like political influence,
Yeah, I know. I was
but
just wondering about that.
it depends on how much money you have. And there was an old saying. I'm trying to remember it. For every coin into purgatory, it was a rhyme, and I can't remember
Yeah.
it. Um, that's given another soul from purgatory springs.
Oh, I
You know,
see. Interesting.
so and Luther problems with that for all sorts of reasons.
Uh-huh.
But what spun out of that was the um, what's the word I'm looking for? The conviction that the idea of purgatory is
Hmm.
not scriptural, or at least not in the Old or New Testaments.
I see.
And it's referred to in some of the other books. We'll get to that a little bit later, but
Hmm.
um, it's not it's not scriptural. And so there's this big focus with Luther and all of the other reformers to return to the commonly accepted scriptures of the Old and the New Testament.
I see. I see.
And
Wow.
so
Hmm.
that spins out again in a lot of ways that we'll talk about in the next several weeks. But if there's, yeah, I'll just leave it right there. So
Okay.
does that,
Fine.
and so, no, I want to take it back to Trent. And so here was this critique of the church and its misuse of power and maybe its misuse of understanding scripture. And they recognized, the church recognized, that Luther might have had a point.
Oh. Mhm.
And so the Council of Trent was summoned to address some of that and then move forward. So again, the Roman Catholic Church as we know it now is mostly a product of Trent.
Yes,
Uh,
I noticed in the Catechism, there's a lot of footnote references to the Council of Trent, and all of those thousands of paragraphs that they have, but they
right,
do seem to refer to that often.
right. And of
So,
course, in the Roman Catholic Church, the Episcopal Church recognizes the seven ecumenical councils. These are the first seven councils of the church
uh-huh.
that were done basically in the 8th century.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Western Church continued to have councils, and so we've got the Council of Trent, in the 16th, 7th century, and then we had Vatican II,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
in the
Mid
60s,
60s, yeah.
another council of the Catholic Church, but not the universal church.
I see.
And so these decisions that were made by the Catholic Church from the 8th century on are not necessarily recognized by the Eastern Orthodox Christians as having any authority at all.
Oh,
Um,
I see.
so when we think about other things in Catholicism, doctrines in Catholicism, like the perpetual virginity of Mary, her bodily assumption into heaven, the infallibility of the Pope. These aren't recognized by the Orthodox churches at all. These were decisions that were made by the Roman Catholic Church.
I see.
Similarly, decisions made by the Episcopal Church, or even the Anglican Communion, but I'll just stick with the Episcopal Church, women's ordination, married clergy, things like this, decisions that weren't made by the universal church aren't recognized by Rome, nor are they recognized by Orthodox Christianity.
I see.
So, and we can make decisions in Colorado that may not be recognized by the Episcopal Church nationally.
Mm-hmm.
So it has a question. It's an issue of boundaries of jurisdiction.
I see. I see.
So
So just quickly, and then we
that's
can
okay.
move on. So when we say we believe in one Catholic and Apostolic Church, is that the same thing as the Universal Church?
Yeah, it's a small C Catholic.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, which is a Latin a Catholic in English is a transliteration, or it's not a translation; it's a transliteration. But Catholic, in that in Latin, is a translation of the Greek word ecumenical,
Oh, I
which
see.
means
Interesting.
which means of the household of the
Mm-hmm.
church. So it
Mm-hmm.
means the whole church.
Mm.
And so when we say the seven ecumenical councils, 1 through 7, we're talking about those that were made before Rome and the Orthodox churches took divergent paths.
I see.
Depending,
That's interesting. Yeah, it's
depending,
interesting because sometimes get offended when you refer to them as the Roman Catholic Church, and they think they're the universal church, and it's not just Rome.
Right,
We're talking to a Catholic.
right. And so the Episcopal Church has no problem, assuming people understand it, saying that it's part of the Catholic Church, but it's not the capital C Roman Catholic Church.
See.
And that's a distinction that is really important to understand. So
Well, I appreciate that. Sort of fills in the gaps. Okay, well,
good,
I'll just
good.
be tuned in for what the previews that you were talking about of the other things we're going to talk about.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay.
That bring anything up for you, Dagmar?
No, I'm just very grateful because that is an excellent question, Bill. I've always wondered that myself. As I say it, I'm like, are we talking about, I didn't think we were, but I'm so glad to know that that's what it means. Perfect.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
There's so much in Christianity that is dependent upon translation.
Mhm.
And some of it's easily understandable and some of it's a little more arcane. And the word Catholic, vis-a-vis the word ecumenical, is one of those examples. There are others. You may have heard, for example, in readings from the Hebrew Bible, a
Mhm.
reference to Baal or Baal,
Yeah.
Baal,
Mhm.
right? That's a word in, I forget, Ugaritic or Canaanite, I forget what the language is, that just means the Lord. That's all it
Oh.
means, is the Lord.
Mm.
But when we translate scripture, we keep it as Baal or Baal, but when we translate Hebrew, we translate the Lord, and everybody assumes it means God or Yahweh,
Mhm.
but those are just two languages for the same thing.
Mhm.
But we call one thing, and we call the other thing, and we don't recognize that they're reference to the same sort of um, existential reality. So it's similar when we think about Muslims who uh, you know, use the word Allah or Allah,
Mhm.
and all that means is God in Arabic. I mean, it's just a translation of God in Arabic. And then people get freaked out thinking that they're talking about some other God. No, they're talking about this. You know, Arab Christians pray to Allah because
Mhm.
that's the word that they have. So I'm a language geek, and I think it makes a big difference.
Mhm.
So whether it's ecumenical or Catholic, that makes a big difference as to how you're reading it and how you're hearing it. So anyway, Bill, that was a really good question. It's kind of like what we did the first week about Anglican and Episcopalian. Well, they're cars, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, really good question.
Yeah.
So tonight we're going to talk about. We get the right screen going. Come on. Where's my cursor? There we go.
It's going fast. There
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is.
there we go. What is and why do we worship? So, what do you think? What's worship for you? What do you get out of Sunday mornings? What is it? Why do we worship?
You want me to jump in? I don't.
Go ahead.
Dagmar, do you have anything to say?
I think part of it is the community and the bonding
Okay.
with everybody when we're at church. That is a big part of it for me. Is because it's when when we greet each other. I think I love that expression that we
Okay.
do because I think it's good that we all feel like we're part of this journey together.
Okay. So it's the way we get together for some greater
Yes,
good,
bigger than
greater
us, but
purpose
we're
or
all
something.
in it
Okay.
together. It's like the word synergism,
Yep.
for
Mm-hmm.
all the individual parts come together to make a bigger whole. And I feel like that's what we're doing.
That makes sense. I like that word. That's a good way of looking at it with synergism, because it's the what is it? The whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Exactly.
And so each person, and that sort of is what I was going to touch on, is that, every day I say the Lord's Prayer, and I do it much slower than what we do it at church, because I like to think through what I'm saying. But it is sort of um, cleansing and refreshing to be able to do that in a worship service, because I know that I am saying that I'm communicating, and I've got the not only the synergy, but it's just like the support of everybody else around me,
Yes.
focusing on one direction. In this case, happens to be the Lord's Prayer, and I find that with all of the prayers that we say, I sometimes, this is just a little aside. Sometimes I feel guilty because I'm not kneeling, because that's what we used to do a lot in the church. And some people down the pew will want to kneel, and then they'll do it, and then I'll feel guilty because I'm not kneeling and all that. So maybe we'll get into that, the mechanics of the worship. But
Yeah.
that's one thing I was wondering about.
Okay. Well, that's good. I appreciate that. And um, we can talk about the mechanics. Hold that thought. Um,
Okay.
you may have to hold it for a couple of weeks,
All
but
right.
maybe not. Maybe we'll get to it tonight. I'll try and hold it up here. But
Okay.
it's a really good question because it's a theological question.
Hmm.
It's not just a worship question, because how we worship, um, you know, other ways of thinking about it is, you know, worship helps us answer our questions for meaning.
Hmm.
We want to know why we're here. We want to
Hmm.
know what
Yeah.
our relationship is to the greater universe and all that kind of stuff. So we want those kinds of answers, or we want to be able to express our finite answers to some of those questions.
Hmm.
And so some of the I'll address this just a little bit for you, Bill. Is some of our answers are, what do you do? How do you bodily, with your body,
Hmm.
express um, your relationship to something you can't understand? You
Hmm.
know, so is you do you just sort of fall down and you say, "I don't get it"?
Hmm.
Um, that's one response,
Hmm.
to bodily response to that which is greater. Another response, a Christian response, um, might be to say, God has redeemed me, and I'm going to stand in full, um, vulnerability to God. God's going to see everything, not just the back of my head, you know. And so I stand fully upright, um, because God created me, and I'm a marvelous creation, so I can stand in front. So those are theological differences expressed bodily.
I see. I see.
And so I would tell you, and I don't often tell people, uh, most often I suggest, but I would tell you, don't feel guilty
Hmm.
um, for expressing your um, understanding of how you want to be in connection with God.
I see.
And sometimes I am very happy to kneel because I feel pretty miserable.
Uh-huh.
That's my expression to God, is I feel pretty miserable before you, God. And other times I am exultant and I am praising, and this is just how my body says to be there.
Yes. Hmm.
So they're both valid.
Okay.
Another reason we respond is that we use our bodies. So
Hmm.
whether it's bowing or kneeling or lifting up our hands, um, we want to say in worship that this is what we do. We bring our whole selves to God in worship, whether it's corporate worship or whether it's individual worship. Um, every morning I get up. After I do some stretches, I come down and I sit at this desk in this basement, and I read prayers. And so my bodily posture is my butt in a chair.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well,
I don't think God cares. You
yeah.
know,
No. Okay.
I think if God cared about anything, God would be happy that my butt was in the chair, reading the prayer book, reading scripture,
Mm-hmm.
all those kinds of things, not kneeling or standing with my arms open or anything else. It's just how do we connect with God? And so what what is and why do we worship? We worship to connect with something greater than ourselves. And getting together with other people, that corporate act is one of those ways. We're in solidarity with other people who have similar beliefs as us about who we are in relationship to that which is greater than us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so you'll see people who are kneeling, you'll see people who are standing, you'll see people who are using a prayer book, you'll see people with their eyes closed. What is it that helps us connect with that which is greater than who we are?
Mm-hmm.
So where do we worship? So think back over your lives and give you a few seconds to think about this. What's the favorite place you have ever worshiped? And I don't mean necessarily a building or a church building or, what's the thing that you remember the most? What's the favorite place?
Well, for me, actually, it wasn't a church. St. Clement's in Alexandria, Virginia is a very unique church because it's dark and it has lights at the top, so they're like stars. It was built to simulate stars, and it's a sort of a dark church. And that's when I remember that's where I went through confirmation and everything. But it was very unique, and it felt comforting to be in that kind of a setting. And then it felt strange to go in other churches because they were so light. There was so much brightness to them, and I'm always associated I don't know, sort of darkness of the night, the universe and stars and all that with worship. And that's not to say there's any problem with Good Shepherd, but I'm just saying that's if I were to pick
Well,
my
I asked
favorite.
the question, your favorite place. You answered it.
And
Dagmar.
I did mention that, when I was in the architects committee, I mentioned that to Father Art. And he said, well, I'm not sure we want Good Shepherd to look like that.
Yeah, okay.
So, oh well.
Dagmar.
Um, Actually, it was Salisbury Cathedral. I went to an evensong service, and there were not very many people, so we actually got to sit right next to the choir. And because that whole service is sung, it was
Yeah.
truly amazing.
And which cathedral was this?
Salisbury Cathedral in
Oh,
England.
Salisbury. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
I
nice.
bow before you.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just were fortunate to be there at that time. We just had seen the Magna Carta and we're like, let's go to
Oh,
the service.
wow.
I
What a
know,
trip.
it was amazing.
What
So
a trip.
that's why I have goosebumps right now thinking about it, okay?
Oh, cool. So I can't remember. One of the readings says that the simple definition of a place of worship is an altar with a roof over it. Um, Maybe a building designed to allow Christian people to gather around an altar for a common meal. So for Christians, gathering to eat together, the Eucharist is pretty significant. But we need a place for instruction as well. So it's not just eating, it's learning, reading scripture, reflecting on scripture. And so this picture that you have here on your right um, is a church in San Francisco, and it's Saint Gregory of Nyssa, and it's a very lovely, amazing building right across the street from Anchor Steam Brewing. But just that's just sort of neither here nor there. I moved to San Francisco area in the late 70s, and this has been built since then. And so they have two different spaces in this church. If you look to the far back over all of the heads of the people, there's a room, a portion of the space, the chairs or the pews are set so you're facing each other across an open space. And in that open space is where the scriptures are read and the sermon is preached.
Hmm.
And then at the offertory, everybody moves into this other space where you see all of these folks dancing, and they dance around the altar, and that's where the meal happens.
Oh,
And so the space says something about the theology of that church. It's an Episcopal church. If you're ever in San Francisco, go.
Mhm.
But you see the paintings up above the real people. These are all dancing saints. Everybody's dancing around this altar in joy and worship. So you go in there and you worship by listening and understanding and hearing the scripture, and then you come in and you dance with joy around the meal that you're going to
Huh.
have.
Wow.
It's an amazing space. I mean, the two founders of this church were very, very savvy in how they did the architectural design. So, a Gothic church, Salisbury Cathedral, for example, uh, everybody's in rows looking forward.
Hmm.
That says something about the theology of the time. Um, that we, the common folks, look forward to where the holy folks are around the altar, and they're helping us understand God. So that's what a sort of a Gothic traditional space looks like. Or you look at something like Good Shepherd, and we're kind of in a semicircle where you can see other people while you're worshiping,
Hmm.
and that really sort of tends to stress the family of God idea. Um,
Hmm.
and that we're all eating at this common table and we can see who are there. It's not so much that the people in front are lecturing, although there is a sermon and all that. There has to be a focal point, but around that focal point, you can still see other people. So I taught a class when I was at University of Denver. I called it Angels in the Architecture. And if you remember the Paul Simon song, um, Angels in the Arch, I forget what it was, the title of the song was, but he talks about angels in the architecture. And what we did in this class is we went to different worship sites around Denver, and we had somebody from that place tell us how the building reflected what their beliefs were. We never went on the day that they worshiped. We went just to hear about how the building expressed their beliefs. And it was fascinating, whether it was the Greek cathedral, the Air Force Chapel, or a big mega church, or the Quaker Meeting House. They could all say that this space says something about what we believe. And so when I'm at Good Shepherd, I understand how that space says something about the architectural idea that generated it, the theological idea that generated it. So in the theater in the round says being with one another is very important. Um, the fact that the floor is sloped so that everybody has a view to what's going on in front was important. So whenever you go into a religious space, whether it's Christian or whatever, is to ask the question, what does this space say about where we worship and why we worship, or who do we worship? Um, and so for us at Good Shepherd, our space says that community is important, but the focus is on the altar where the common meal happens.
Mhm.
Um, and so here in this picture, instruction is important. I couldn't get both pictures together, one that shows the instruction side and the dancing side. But instruction is important, and then communal joy around the altar is important. And they've figured out how to do this. So, like I say, if you go to San Francisco, go to St. Gregory's. I also had a professor in seminary who stressed over and over again that the building always wins. So once you construct something, it's really hard to change it or to do something that the building wasn't constructed to do. So you have to get really creative. um, if we've got, like we do at Good Shepherd, if the pews are fixed to the floor, that means that dancing around the altar, like they do at St. Gregory's, is impossible.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's not just that, there are a lot of other examples, but what the building says, if the building is Gothic and everything is facing forward, how do you how do you deal with that when you want people to look at each other when they're praying or sobbing or whatever? It's really hard. So the building always wins, but you can sort of mitigate your losses if you're creative. Um, so where we worship is important.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
I want to give you a sort of a observation, and I did do this at every single service. It's sort of unique because what I notice when the service is going in, of course, I'm trying to focus in on that, but it's the uniqueness of the stained glass windows on the Dry Creek side. And what I notice is that we are worshiping God, and yet there's this glimpse, very subtle, of cars going up
Yeah.
and down, and you can see it in the stained glass windows that something's going on outside as well as what's going inside.
That's a profound theological observation.
Yeah.
Is that the world is going on out there and we're in here.
Yeah,
And what is
yeah,
the relationship between us and them?
that's right. It's very unique because in the typical church stained glass window, you don't have any of that, So
Yeah, it's probably higher up. And
yes,
so the traffic is below the window level.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, really great observation. So, moving on, in the Episcopal Church, the question is what guides our worship? Um, if you go to other Christian churches, uh, I will say if you go to them for any length of time, you'll discover that there is an order to their service. But when you ask them, why do we do it this way? Often they will say, well, because, because we've always done it this way. Um, but for us as Episcopalians, we use the prayer book, the Book of Common Prayer. And so I want to ask you, when you're there, wherever you worship as an Episcopalian, do you ever pull out the prayer book and look at it? Do you look what's in it? Do you see what it contains, what it doesn't contain, all of that kind of stuff?
Can I answer that?
Sure, please.
Sure.
Um, no, I don't. However, because of this class, it has made me think I want to.
Okay,
So I now make sure I have a book of common prayer, and I
okay.
am determined to go through it and read it. And
Don't do that. It's
no, no, what I meant, especially using the book and some of the areas they tell you that you can find this there, or like the private prayers they talk about and things like that. That's the sort of thing I would like to learn how to use it, for. Does that make sense? I'm sorry, but
no. It makes perfect sense, and
yeah,
we'll come back to that a little bit later this
okay.
evening. But yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's Well, I don't want to jump in. Bill, do you have anything to?
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, I look at it. I think one of the things, and I sort of remember this from way back in when I was going through confirmation class. They used to, talk about what I think they call it the rubric. So it's the italics instruction that
Right,
goes along. And of course, we don't get that in the printed, the printed thing we get during the service. But in the prayer book, it's got that extra, instructional procedure kind of stuff. And I
sure.
find that interesting. So sometimes I will look at that to try to make sense
Yeah,
of what that's going on.
yeah. So to that point, the issue of rubrics that has to do with the what used to be printed in the books, or at least in the altar books, that might be printed in red. And the
That's right.
rubrics would be telling you, ruber, red, uh, these are instructions
Hmm.
for what you may or may not do. And
Hmm.
so for the people who are out in the pews, it usually is unimportant. But for the people who are directing worship, it is. And so what we've done in at least in the Episcopal Church for a long time is in the books that are put in the pews, we italicize that stuff and often make it in smaller print.
Yes.
So rather than 16 point, it's down to 12 point or
Yeah.
whatever, you know, um,
Hmm.
and italicized, which people just sort of pass by.
Hmm.
And of course, at Good Shepherd and many other churches, um, we print the worship in a leaflet, so
Hmm.
people don't even have to look at the book, so they don't see the rubrics. I have to worry about them,
Yeah.
um, and I have to worry about there are two different kinds of rubrics in the book. There's what are known as shall rubrics, and then there are may rubrics. So
Mm.
the shall rubrics tell us what we have to do,
Yeah.
and the may rubrics tell us what we can do, or we can change if we want to for a good reason.
I see.
And so if you go into the prayer book and you look through the rubrics, you might see something that says, then shall be said, or at this point, you may do this, or you may do that, or you may do this.
Would that be sort of like calling an audible in football, where you have a respond to a situation in worship where you need to change things?
Um, I wouldn't equate them because they're not usually on the fly.
Oh,
An
okay.
audible would be on the fly,
Yeah.
but for example, um, on a Sunday morning, usually, unless we're in Lent, we'll sing the Gloria, glory to God in the highest, and on peace, on our peace, goodwill. The rubric says, then, I have to look exactly, so I'm going to get this a little bit wrong. Then shall be sung a song of praise.
Hmm.
And, so it may be the Gloria in Excelsis, but you can do some other song of praise. It doesn't have to be that one. There just has to be a song of praise. So we have to make that decision before we go into church. It's not like I'm going to tell the organist, oh, by the way, we didn't tell you this before the service, but you need to play hymn 733 right now. You know, that it doesn't work that way. So it's not an audible, but it gives some options.
Yeah, I was
And
thinking of that because a few Sundays ago, when that candle wouldn't, when you couldn't get that candle started, and then there's nothing on the altar, and then all of a sudden something appeared. And I was wondering how that worked out.
yeah. Well, I don't want to get into that.
Okay, it's all right.
But and I will. There are people at the church at Good Shepherd who um, may not necessarily be happy with me about this,
Uh-huh.
but I'm a firm believer in the fact that the prayer book and the rubrics
Hmm.
were made for us.
Hmm.
We were not made for them.
Yes, that's right.
And so I'm flexible in that
That's
sense.
good.
Like I say, there are folks at the church who don't like that, and that's okay. Um, that's where we are. So, but if you go into the church, in the Good Shepherd or most Episcopal churches, you'll find two books, at least two books. You'll find the Book of Common Prayer and the hymnal.
Mhm.
Those are the two that you will almost always find. You may find a Bible. You may find a hymnal supplement, like we've got the Green Songbook at Good Shepherd. But those first two books, the hymnal and the Book of Common Prayer, those are what guide our worship as Episcopalians. And we find our unity in the Book of Common Prayer. We know that if you go from Good Shepherd 4 miles west to St. Timothy's, they will be using the same book. You go 10 miles north to the cathedral, they will be using the same book. If you go all the way to Washington, D.C., they will be using the same book. We find our unity in the Book of Common Prayer. That's what guides our worship. There may be slight differences, but any Anglican church that you go to around the world, Canada, South Africa, Australia, Scotland, if you go into an Anglican church, it will feel familiar, if not exactly feeling like home. I did some counseling, premarital counseling, a long time ago for a couple where the bride was Episcopalian and the groom was Roman Catholic.
Hmm.
And the reason I was doing the counseling is because the bride's brother was an Episcopal priest, and he wasn't going to do the counseling for his sister. I get it. I wasn't,
Yeah.
And so I asked him about worship, and I said, "How do you feel about, worshiping together?" And they go back and forth, and the groom said, "Well, I don't have any problem going to the Episcopal church. It's like going to Grandma's house, and she's rearranged the furniture. Everything's familiar. It just is a little different." And you might find that in different Episcopal churches. But basically, the prayer book guides our worship.
Yeah.
Um, it and that's been the case since the beginning of the Church of England. The Elizabethan Compromise. I don't care what you believe, use this book. This is what will unite us, is using this book. And that has been our heritage ever since then. So in there is instructions for worship. And basically, in the prayer book, worship includes everybody. There's always a part for the clergy or the leaders. It doesn't have to be clergy. And there's a part for the congregation. And it goes back and forth. It's not just one person that's doing everything or one group that's doing everything. The people in the pew always have something to do. That is their right, their responsibility for that. Worship is not just on Sundays. In the prayer book, we have orders for daily prayer. It's not like you just go to church on Sunday, say the prayers, and then you go do everything else. You're constantly engaged because of the way that we worship through the Book of Common Prayer. We've got morning prayer, noonday prayer, evening prayer, late night prayer. All of those are found in the Episcopal book or in the books of Common Prayer, certainly the very modern ones. And then, it's not just Sunday, and it's not just in church. Like I said, I sit down here at about 5 o'clock every morning, and I am reading morning prayer here. I'm studying, I'm praying at this desk where I'm talking to you right now, at this desk. This is not the church. It's a basement of a house, but this is a place where I engage God through the structure of the Book of Common Prayer. It contains the prayers that we use every week on Sunday, both the ones that happen every Sunday and the ones that happen once a year, what we call the collects that bring our worship. The Book of Common Prayer has different orders for service on Ash Wednesday, in a week and a half. We'll be doing Ash Wednesday. The ways to construct worship for that are there. The ways to construct worship for Maundy Thursday for Easter, for baptism. They're all there. It's not making it up as it goes. It's not looking back at what we did last year. It's there in the book. This book guides us. The book contains how do we recognize major life events, births, deaths, being getting married, being sick. The book tells us, and these are prayers that have existed around and rites that have existed for hundreds of years, maybe even 1,000 years. The book holds in itself one entire book of Scripture. The whole book of Psalms is in our prayer book, and so this becomes part of who we are, especially if we do the daily offices, if we do morning and evening prayer. We recite all of those Psalms 6 times a year, or in some ways of doing it once every 30 days. So that whole book of the Bible is embedded in our Book of Common Prayer. So I think maybe it was one of the readings said, here in one book is the whole of life from birth to death and the answers to most of our questions about the church. This is what distinguishes us as Episcopalians. It's not a book of discipline, it's a book of worship. And for us as Episcopalians, we are grounded in our worship. And we have this book, this amazing book, that helps us understand all of that. So, questions. Recognizing that probably I've talked too long and it's 10 till 8. I still got 15 slides to go through. So questions. I'm happy to engage them.
I don't have any right now.
Okay, I've got. I don't want to override you, Dagmar. I just
No,
got
Bill,
a question.
go. You have such good questions. Go,
Well,
please.
I appreciate that. When you said you said evening prayer, are you talking about Compline?
So there in the Book of Common Prayer, and what I may get to the, I think depending on time, might get to this evening. There's an order for morning prayer. There's an order for noonday prayers. There's an order for evening prayer, and there's an order for end of the night prayers, which would be Compline.
Okay, I was wondering because I watch a, and that was going to be my next question. Is of course we have the printed prayer book, but to get the, I guess essentially the electronic version, there's this Anglican church in England, and he does this YouTube on Compline.
Yep,
and I was thinking that was just characteristic of the Anglican church, not the Episcopal church.
No, we have that in our prayer book.
Oh, nice.
And it's the end of the night. It's the end of the day prayers. It's the good night to God prayers.
I see.
And it's there. We have a couple of different versions of it, and I think we'll get to that. Well,
okay.
We will get to that, whether it's tonight or it's next week.
Okay.
But yeah, the prayer book is an amazing resource. And every so often I run into somebody who's not an Episcopalian who, for one reason or another, got introduced to the Book of Common Prayer, and they're evangelical or non-denominational or whatever, and they say, I never knew that this was even possible. And I said, well, yeah, it is. And that's what we've been doing for hundreds of years. So what the book does is it contains these ways that we encounter God that we call the sacraments. And the understanding of the sacraments is that God works through material things to change human lives. And we'll talk about all of that as we keep going on. But the classical definition of sacraments is a physical, material thing that reflects an inner or spiritual engagement with God. So you've got material stuff that represents a spiritual reality. and so we'll talk about that. Um, and well, I'm going to go on. I'm not going to go off on that tangent. So the Episcopal Church recognizes 7 sacraments: baptism, Eucharist, confirmation, confession or penance, whatever you want to call it, marriage, unction, which is anointing of the sick and or the dead, the dying, and ordination. These are the ways that we as Christians engage in material ways with God, and how God speaks to us in deep ways through material things. And so baptism, it's us and water, right?
Mhm. Yep.
In one way or another. So what does that mean for us? Is this an initiation into a club? Could be. Or is this inclusion a means of inclusion into a family? And that's kind of I don't want to say it's a thorny question. It's a double-sided or a double-edged sword, if you will. So how do we bring people into the church? How do we bring people in to the body of Christ? Is it just somebody who raises their hand and says, "I'm here"? Okay. For some churches, that's sufficient. But is it, like I said, is it membership into a club? Um, if you become a Mason, there are ways that things that you go through to make sure that you're fully incorporated in the Masonic ritual, the Masonic rite. Um, is it, or there are, I belong to a lot of clubs. I'm a member of the Cutthroat chapter of Trout Unlimited. How did I become a member of that club? I paid my dues. Nobody I go to meetings every month. Nobody stands up and says, "Well, we want to welcome the new members, and here are these new members." Nobody says anything like that. It's just I paid my dues. I get the newsletter. Okay. Um, there are other clubs that are much more demanding about what it means to be a member. Um, or is it an adoption into the family? Um, if you're adopted, I have 2 children, both of whom we adopted from China. We had to go through some serious stuff to be able to adopt our children. We had to do things from the Chinese government side. We had to do things from the U.S. government side. We had to satisfy um, the local government through the use of a home study with a social worker that we were qualified to be able to adopt children. Uh, you
Mm.
know, we had to do all these things. So, is adoption the right metaphor? How do we bring somebody in to what we refer to as the body of Christ? Our baptismal rite, the ritual that we do, and we will do this coming Sunday because we're going to we're going to baptize a couple of kids. Um, when you listen to the words that we use, they talk about what is going on for the family, what is going on for the church, and what is going on for these children, in terms, whether they realize it or not, in terms of what brings them into the Christian community. Now, for Anglicans, we we tend to baptize by pouring of water over the head of the person who's being baptized, whether they're a child or an adult. Here we see in the picture, we see probably Greek Orthodox baptism, where this little kid is dunked fully into this tub and pulled out. And so there's a theology of baptism that gets played out in even the ritual. But here it's water. It's water that is the material thing that represents some sort of inner spiritual transformation. Whether this poor little kid understands it or not, theologically it says a lot about what we understand baptism to be.
Can
And
I say something real quick, Gary? I've got a real quick question. It's related to what you're talking about with baptism. And it's my impression is that baptism is a sort of a super sacrament because you're getting the congregation involved. I mean, that's why I like to watch it so much, is because we're included in it and committing to taking care of this child that's being baptized. We're involved.
exactly. So there are two of the seven sacraments. Okay. So there are two of these sacraments, the top two, that are sometimes referred to as dominical. That means that Jesus said you should do these.
Yes.
So go therefore and baptize. Do this every week in remembrance of me. So baptism and Eucharist are considered the dominical sacraments. They are done always in community.
Yeah.
They should be done in community. A lot of the rest of these, confirmation, maybe in the whole, some of them are private. You don't want to do your confession
No.
in front of the whole community, right?
No.
You
No.
know, and you're not going to get the whole community around the bed when you're dying
No.
or when you're sick. So these are different ways, but the first two, baptism and Eucharist, are recognized by every Christian body, regardless of denomination, as Jesus said to do this. And then the next five are sometimes, I forget the technical term, but, for the Episcopal Church, Catholic Church, Lutheran Church, Orthodox Church, we consider them sacraments. The Methodist Church will do confirmations, but doesn't consider it in the same category as baptism or Eucharist. Some churches don't want to have anything to do with confession. Some churches think that marriage is great and the church should bless it, but it's not a sacrament. Every pastor that I know of any variety will go visit somebody who's sick and pray with them. But do they do other things? So we'll continue with that, but that was a good question, Bill. So Eucharist, again, I'm moving quickly. It's 8:00 something. Eucharist is a Greek word that just means giving thanks. That's all it means, is thanksgiving. And so that is what we gather to do on Sundays. And so after we've done the readings and the sermon and the prayers and the creed, and after I do the announcements,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
then there is the offertory. And that doesn't mean taking up a collection. It means giving in material ways what we can to God in thanksgiving, but also to say to God, bless this that we might be a blessing going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So we bring down to the altar the offerings, money, and we also bring down bread and wine. All of those are laid on the altar, and we ask God to transform all of those from what they look like to the common eye into something greater for use of God's purposes. So I've got colleagues who don't do this, but I leave the money on the altar. It's not dirty. It's not something like that. It's an offering of who we are, just like bread and wine is an offering of who we are, and we ask God to bless and transform it into a means of mission. So here we have material gifts, bread, wine, money, that God transforms, takes this material, outward, invisible sign and turns it into an inward and invisible grace of what we do in terms of worship. So what does it mean if we take bread and wine and I pray these mysterious words over it? What does it mean that happens to that bread and wine? And so there are various theologies, various ways that Christians have understood what goes on at that portion of the service with this bread, whether it's a wafer or it's a little whole wheat loaf or something else, and this wine. And for Episcopalians, it's got to be wine. It's not grape juice. Grape juice, by the way, you just need to know, because most people don't know, that Mr. Welch of Welch's Grape Juice, that was a response to the prohibition of how you couldn't do wine in Protestant churches, and so we had to do something else. And Welch figured out how to make grape juice not turn into wine so they could use it in churches.
Interesting.
And of course, Roman Catholics and other churches got dispensations to be able to use real wine. But for Baptists and Methodists and other churches. So anyway, that's how we got Welch's grape juice. Just, side factoid.
Yeah.
There you are.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, so what happens with the bread and wine? So there are a number of ways of understanding that. Sort of the Roman Catholic way would be to talk about transubstantiation. I imagine you've heard that word,
Mhm.
which suggests that, this is a medieval theological, philosophical distinction that says that bread looks like bread. It's what is called the accident in philosophical thought. The accident is breadness. The substance is different. So the accident of bread is changed. The substance of yeast and all of that is changed into the body of blood. So the substance is changed, transubstantiated, although the accident stays the same. The substance of fermented grape juice stays the same. It's wine. Or the accident, the substance changes from wine into blood. That's what transubstantiation means. It's a late medieval theological, philosophical idea that most of us don't get. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
That's traditional Roman Catholic theology. But what is on the other side is that we are reminded of the sacrifice of Christ through taking the bread and wine. This is a thing that we do in our mind. We remember what happened. That's a very reformed way of understanding. Anglicans, some Lutherans, and most Orthodox Christians don't get bound up in these theological distinctions. And there's a poem that attributed to Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth I, who she said or wrote, "He, Christ, was the word that spake it. He was the bread that brake it. And what his word did make it, that I believe and take it." So whatever Christ did, I don't know what it is, but he did it, and so that's what I did. And so Anglicans, and again, many Lutherans and Orthodox would say, I'm not going to get involved in what happens at the prayer of consecration. All I know is that Christ is really present in the bread and the wine.
Mhm.
And what does that mean to you? How do you understand it? It doesn't make much difference. I remember probably, 2 or 3 weeks after I was ordained a priest. So this was a long time ago, 30 many years ago. And as I was a deacon, I was often giving people the chalice. And in the church where I was doing this, everybody kneeled. So they're all looking down. They want to make sure that they get the chalice. They're not looking at me. They're looking down. After I became a priest, they were looking at me because they wanted to receive the bread. It wasn't they were looking down. They wanted to make sure they grabbed it and all that. And I asked myself, I haven't a clue what they think they're getting. I don't know. And at that point, I realized it's not important. Whether their understanding and my understanding is the same, they're getting something that draws them back here
Hmm.
every week.
That's right. That's for sure.
And that, for me, was the real presence of Christ. And that's what I understand the Eucharist to be. And so as we think about how is Jesus present in the bread, whether it's a little wafer or whether it's, a much more substantial loaf, or whether it's, white wine or red wine, um, we offer it. We've blessed it in the prayer of consecration. We have said that this is different now, and you will get it as you get it, and or not, and that's where it is. So what we often talk about is that there is a unity in essentials, but diversity in the sort of specifics. So the essential thing around which Christians are unified is this action of the Eucharist. We're not going to get too concerned about how we understand it differently. So on every Sunday morning, at least a Good Shepherd and in most Episcopal churches, people will come down and they will have a different understanding of what they're getting. Is this just, I remember what Christ did for me on the cross, or is now I am eating the body and drinking the blood of Christ in some sort of sacrificial way? I don't know. There's not a brand on their forehead that says, "Oh, you got to say these sets of words because this is what I believe," or "You got to say these sets of words." It's a mixture. I'm going to stop for just a second and see if there are any questions, and I'll move to the next slide.
When Jesus said, "Give us this day our daily bread," was he referring to the Eucharist?
Good question.
That's why I asked.
I probably not.
Oh,
Could be.
so he's talking about just
I think in the Lord's Prayer addresses much more sort of concrete realities. The daily bread being, help us have what we need for today.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
But you can take it the other way. That's fine. So, excuse me, Dagmar, I didn't want to cut you off. I didn't know if you had any questions or thoughts.
Nope.
Okay. So we've got these two what are called dominical sacraments, the baptism and the Eucharist. Baptism often gets, at least in the Episcopal Church, gets linked to birth and really early life, but certainly there are many other aspects. People convert, and this is how they get in through baptism, converting to the church, this attention to new life. So baptism isn't just a rite of passage, a recognition of birth. But there is this attention in the prayer book and among Episcopalians to our life in general. And so we have these other, these four sacraments that recognize that we need a special connection to God at various points in our life. And confirmation, I could spend, and I have spent hours talking about confirmation, but a lot of times what confirmation means is an affirmation by somebody who can make an adult decision of commitments that were made on their behalf when we were younger. So in some respects, it has turned into a rite of passage of like puberty or coming of age. It's not all it is, but that's one of the ways that we attend to making an adult decision um, that we may not have really understood earlier in life. Confession. I don't know about you all, but I've made plenty of mistakes in my life. Some of
Hmm.
them significant, um, that might have said, I'm not worthy to stand before God. Um, so how do we make our way back to that relationship with God that might be life-giving if we feel like we've done something that separates us from God? And so the rite of reconciliation of the penitent, which is the language we use in the prayer book, um, attends to that. Confirmation, thinking about material things, confirmation might mean, well, what it will mean is the hands of a bishop on your head. In older rites, I was slapped by my bishop when I was confirmed,
Hey.
My.
um, as a reminder to say, as a Christian, this is what you should expect. You should
Oh.
expect persecution. This is not an easy thing that you're committing yourself to. Um, and so there was a slap, there was oil in confirmation. Confession, there is uh, the rite, the gesture of the cross. There might be laying on of hands. Marriage, there's a ring. Um, now, um, when I do weddings, I will wrap the hands of the bride and groom or the couple. I will wrap their hands in the stole. So there's a very material thing that says you have been brought into a relationship with each other that is bound by God. Unction, the anointing of the sick, again, oil, and laying on of hands. These are these material things. And often when I go to see somebody in the hospital, um, or if I know that they are close to death, they want that right. They want to be anointed.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
want hands. They want connection. Um, and so the prayer book has all of these rites in it, and they follow this order. After you, if you look in the prayer book next time you look through the prayer book, you'll get to the order of communion and all of that. And then pretty much the next thing is confirmation, because that's the age sort of thing. Um, and you'll get to confession, you'll get to marriage, and you'll get to visiting of the sick, and you'll get to burial of the dead. It just follows your life, um, all the way through. The prayer book recognizes that we as mortal beings have a lifespan. And it may be a really long lifespan or it may be a compressed lifespan. But the church is there for all of this. And we have a way of recognizing it. And if you read the prayers in these various orders, whether it's confirmation or visitation of the sick or being there when somebody's dying, these prayers have been around for hundreds of years. It's not like somebody had to come up with them. They are things that have stood the test of time. I 2 weeks ago I was in California, or a week and a half ago I was in California to for my mother-in-law's funeral. She was Baptist, um, so I didn't do the funeral, but I did do the committal. In other words, the prayer right before her body was put into the mausoleum. And those prayers are significant. They've been around for hundreds of years.
Hmm.
And you don't have to say a lot of words. It was two sides of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper where there were probably 100 words together. And I had all these people come up to me and say, "Oh, that was beautiful." I said, Yeah, I know. There are 100 years. These words have been around for hundreds of years. I didn't have to make them up, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go on forever. I'll say what's important. And, there's a value in that. That's that communion of saints using the same words that have been used for centuries. And then the last of the sacraments is ordination. The first six of all of those are available to every person, every Christian. Um, and ordination is available to every Christian, but only if they're called to be ordained. And so it is, again, an outward and physical sign of an inward and spiritual grace, laying on of hands. If you go to any ordination um, of a bishop, a priest, or a deacon, there's laying on of hands. When I was ordained a priest, there were a dozen priests that were there. The weight of their hands on my shoulder and my head was profound. When I was ordained a deacon, it was the bishop's hands. When there are ordinations of bishops, it's other bishops and the weights of their hands on their shoulders and on their heads. It is very physical. This is not some just, oh yeah, okay, go out, you got a new job. It's not like that. It's very physical, it's very profound. The woman in the picture here is Barbara Harris. She was the first woman ordained a bishop in the Episcopal Church.
Hmm. Interesting.
Ordained in Massachusetts. I can't remember the year. It may show up. But lay people are ordained by virtue of their baptism into ministry in the church. Bishops, priests, and deacons are ordained into specific ministries in the church on top of their ordination as a baptized Christian. So everybody who has been baptized has been ordained just into a particular order of ministry to which they are called. And so if you're an infant and you're baptized, you are ordained into the Christian family. Should you seek confirmation, that is confirmed and emphasized. Then beyond that, you might be called to be a deacon. Nadine, our deacon, is called to be a deacon. That is so clear that that is her calling, to serve others on behalf of the church. I'm ordained to be a priest. I'm ordained to celebrate the Eucharist, to bless folks who are getting married, to do blessings at time of death. That's my job. Bishops are ordained to lead a diocese. That's their job, and to ordain priests and deacons to help them to do that. Well, we're all ordained to different things. Some of us are called to one or another of those orders, but the laity are ordained through their baptismal vows. There are, I want to go back and just talk about some of these, what I called other ordinations. This is important for the Episcopal Church because we are not the same as some other churches as well. So we ordain women. There's a long history of that. Phoebe in the book of Romans is referred to as a deacon, not a deaconess, not as something other than the word that we use today for deacon. So we've got women deacons going back to the New Testament, clearly going back to the New Testament, at least in terms of the words that are used in the New Testament. 1974, the Episcopal Church ordained, or some bishops in the Episcopal Church ordained 11 women. They're called the Philadelphia 11. And it was considered illegal because the Book of Common Prayer, the canons of the church, did not allow for it. It wasn't irregular because bishops did it, but it was illegal because the laws didn't allow for it. In 1976, the laws allowed for it. So Sandy Boyd, who is a member of our congregation, wasn't one of the Philadelphia 11, but she was one of the first couple of dozen of women that were ordained in the Episcopal Church. And we are so lucky to have her with us because she connects us to that heritage. As I said before, the picture in the last slide, Barbara Harris, there it is, 1989, was ordained a bishop. First woman bishop in the Anglican Communion, not just the Episcopal Church. And then in 2006, the Episcopal Church elected Catherine Jefferts Shorey to be our presiding bishop. So our equivalent to the Archbishop of the United States. She was elected in 2006 and served until 2015 when Michael Curie became the royal wedding bishop, became our Archbishop, our presiding bishop. So we in the Episcopal Church, partly because of our theology of ordination or of baptism, we think that baptism says that you are fully a member of the church. So if you're fully a member of the church, you should have access to all that the church offers. And so that means that if you're baptized in the Episcopal Church as a woman, you should be able to become a deacon. You should be able to become a priest. You should be able to become a bishop because you're fully baptized. You're baptized and therefore fully a member. The same argument became applied to LGBTQ folks who are baptized. Why can't they be priests? Why can't they be bishops? And this, when the Episcopal Church adopted the 1979 Book of Common Prayer and all of its theology, this is where it led. It led to women's ordination and it led to the ordination, a full ordination of LGBTQ folks. This is why we stand where we do. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are questions, comments.
Can I ask one more question, then I'll shut up?
No, that's okay. We're running out of, and I think what we'll do is we'll stop here.
Okay.
So and then I'll pick up. So I'll just show you. We've got to talk about music. We got to talk about personal spirituality. We got to talk about the daily office. Got to talk about all of these other things. We'll do that next time.
Okay.
So because other people will be really interested in that too. But what was your question, Bill?
Okay, I think it's related to what you used to do or are still doing, and it's about unordination, or I guess defrockment or something like that. Is that part of the history and all?
Say that again. I must have
Well, it's like it's when a priest is defrocked or unordinated. How is that scriptural? I mean, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, what an interesting question. Never been asked that one before, but I think I can answer it. So, when you are ordained, there is both a spiritual component to it and then a sort of logistical component. And certainly, if you are defrocked, or you can renounce your orders. What you basically say is, if it's you say, I renounce my orders. I made a mistake. I no longer believe this. It was all a sham. All that kind of stuff. Then the church would pull back the privileges that you would have garnered by being ordained. So Um, both of you have graduated from college, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Or,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
or a graduate program or something like that. You probably never paid attention to, because nobody does, um, to what is said when the degree is conferred. And what is said by the president of the college or whatever, I now confer upon you the degree of blah, 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 with all the rights, privileges pertaining thereto,
Mm.
right?
Right.
And, so it might be that you can put BA or PhD behind your name. You can be referred to as doctor or whatever. Same thing happens with ordination, is that there are rights and privileges pertaining to your ordination. And, so for example, in some states, not in Colorado anymore, in some states, if you are ordained, you are given the right or privilege of acting as a magistrate of the state to solemnize a wedding. That's a contract. And so the clergy function as a magistrate or as a officer of the state to solemnize that contract. Well, if that is pulled away from you, you can no longer do it. Okay, so if you are defrocked in that circumstance, you can no longer do that. Colorado, we don't do that. You can jump up on top of Mount Blue Sky, you and your partner, and say, we're married, and you're married, as long as you paid the state for your marriage license. It doesn't require any kind of magistrate, whether it's a justice of the peace or clergy person, to solemnize that. So when you are defrocked, if I were to be defrocked, I could no longer celebrate the sacraments. Those are the kinds of things. And if I said I renounce my vows, it would mean I no longer want to do that. I don't feel called to do that.
Hmm.
So, does that make sense, Bill?
Yes, it does. It does.
Okay. It doesn't happen very often. So I've been a priest for 30 many years, and maybe 4 or 5 times in all of those years, I will get a letter from the bishop saying that as of X and X date, clergy person Y. Smith Jones is no longer a priest deacon and has renounced their orders. And so, it's not like I can call him up and say, hey, can you fill in for me on Sunday? I'm going to be gone. Can't do that anymore. Those kinds of things. So it's a formal letter, very, very formal and very stylized. So it's a significant thing. Both of you, I think, are maybe old enough to remember the show with Chuck Connor's TV show, Branded.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know,
Yes, I
maybe
did.
Dagmar, you don't remember this one, but so here's this Civil War officer has all of his buttons plucked off, his epaulets pulled
Yeah,
off,
I
his
remember.
sword broken over his knee. That's defrocking.
Oh, goodness.
It's a significant thing for folks to make that decision if you choose to renounce your orders or to have them taken away from you for reasons of malfeasance, misbehavior, all of that kind of stuff. It happens. It's just rare. It's just rare. So,
Well, then one other thing, real quickly, does that mean since you said that we are all ordained at baptism in the laity? So
yep.
would the equivalent be excommunication for those of us in the laity?
I don't think no, I don't think so.
Okay.
When if you're in church on Sunday, you'll hear me say, as I mark on the forehead of the baptized, you are marked as Christ's own forever.
Oh, okay. Okay.
What you choose to do with that is your own choice,
Mm-hmm.
but your relationship with Christ has been established through baptism. I don't know what it would mean to renounce your baptism. I just don't know. I just don't know.
Okay. That's nice to know. Yeah, because I was concerned about that.
Yeah, don't do it.
Okay.
Anyway, this was a whole lot of fun.
Yes.
And we'll cover all the rest of this next week. I'll do it. I'm trying to remember what we do next week. Let's see. Do I have that on the slides? Nope. Next week I think we talk about the Bible. So
Okay.
I have way too much fun doing these things. So
Yes, we do too. We do too.
all right.
Absolutely.
Anyway, good night. Hope to see you soon.
Everybody. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next
Yeah.
week.
Bye bye.
Bye.